I want to be good at what I do, and that's my motivation. And by committing to being really good at what I do, then by default translates into success and making a quota, then that's the type of motivation you need. That's what I believe it is at the core of it, is this burning desire. You really just got to give a shit. I give a shit about being good and serving my customers and making a difference and excelling. I give a shit about that.
Hello Sales Nation and welcome to the Salesman Podcast live in partnership with HubSpot and recorded at the Leadership Summit in amazing Chicago. On this episode we have Jim Keenan. He is a true sales expert and a legend to boot. And on this episode he's sharing with us how we can become self-motivated so that we can really crush it in sales, both in the short term and over the long term. You can find out more about Jim over at asalesguide.com. Link to that and everything else in the show notes to this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with all that said, let's jump straight in. Welcome back again to the Salesman Podcast.
Oh, what's up, baby? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you on. I'm glad that you're here to kind of wrap up this final recording I'm doing today, because you always bring the fire, you always bring the passion over this.
I'm the last one?
You're the last one.
What's that phrase? Save the best for last?
Hell yeah, man.
Okay, that better be the answer. That's the only answer that's appropriate.
So we're going to dive into motivation. I want to get your thoughts on this, and hopefully towards the end of the show we can get practical with it, but I want to just have a fiery conversation in that, and I'm going to bait you with this massively, and I know we're going to go with it, and we're going to follow through from there. But should salespeople only be motivated by the sales manager, I guess either dangling a carrot of commission in front of them, or like the sales manager boots up their arse if they're doing things wrong? Should that be a sales professional's sole motivation? Or should it be more intrinsic than that? Do salespeople need to be winners even?
All right, look, motivation is a personal thing, right? And I also look at motivation as a tactical thing or a micro thing and a macro thing, right? So yeah, if you're like, if you have a quota to make and you're tired on a Friday afternoon, or it's Sunday, evening, and you'd rather watch, I don't know, whatever fucking thing comes on Netflix, and you'd rather hang out and watch that. But you realize, oh shit, if I can get this deal done and I've got a call tomorrow with so-and-so, so I better prepare because I want to get this done. If an extra $10,000 is going to motivate you to get that action done in that moment, okay, who gives a shit what it is, right? As long as you're motivated to get it done tactically. But that type of motivation doesn't last for a very long time, right? That motivation is we'll call transactional motivation. But the intrinsic motivation that you talked about, I believe that's about wanting to be the best that you can be, right? That is a personal thing that I think reflects on you. Even people who have broader desires to conquer the world, if they're doing it because they want to be billionaires, if they're doing it because they want to be popular, if they're doing it for that type of stuff, I just don't think that rings true very long, and I think you turn into an asshole, or you're just not a very positive person. But if you are like, look, I want to be good. I want to be good at what I do, and that's my motivation. And by committing to being really good at what I do, then by default translates into success and making a quota, then that's the type of motivation you need. That's what I believe it is at the core of it, is this burning desire. You really just got to give a shit. I give a shit about being good and serving my customers and making a difference and excelling. I give a shit about that. And if that's really the only motivation I think that lasts and gets you anywhere.
So let me give you some context on this from my background. So medical device sales, I perhaps give 50% of a shit. I was driven by hitting the target, not anything internally, not me being the best medical device sales rep, not me providing the best possible service for the surgeons. Clearly, not clearly. I'd like to think I'm a good guy and I've got good, high moral standards, so I was always doing my best in the circumstance, but I never went above and beyond. Versus now with the Salesman Podcast, I do have that.
Yes.
I do want it to be the biggest and best podcast out there. I do really want to affect and impact our audience and the wider context of sales. We've had a couple of conversations on here today at the Leadership Summit of how we can adapt and change this negative stereotype of salespeople. And this all ties into something that I am now passionate about. And for example, when I'm selling the ad space, when I'm dealing with HubSpot and putting deals together, I do get riled up about it all.
Yeah.
So how do we go about implementing this into the day-to-day? Is it as simple as, if you're not motivated intrinsically by your organization, by the industry you're in, by the product you're selling, you need to go do something else? Or can this almost be learned and over time.
No. Look, you have to want to do it, right? If so, I have this thing right now, and you may have seen it that I've really been talking a lot about. It's about being a 1%er, right? So we hear, the Tony Robbins and the Tony Robbins and the Gary Vaynerchuk's. I mean, Gary's really popular these days, and they're all talking about, hustle and drive and grit and right? Which I get it. Like, you got to work your ass off, right? But in my opinion, the key to success isn't all that hustle and drive first. That's the output, right? The key to success is a desire to be the 1%er, to be the best. Anybody who's the best in something is successful, right? I know tons of people who hustle their ass off and they're going nowhere. Like, they're hustling their way on a hamster wheel. They're just running, and they're tired as shit, but they're not successful. Why? Because they're not that good. But when you actually commit to being a 1%er, is what I call it, then you're the 1%er is being better than 99 out of 100 people doing what you do. And some people say, well, that's kind of high. Like, no, it's not really if you think about it. This idea of being the best, well, how do you quantify the best? There can only be one Lindsey Vonn, right? There can only be one Tiger Woods at a time, right? There can only be one swimmer guy. What's his name? Michael Phelps, right? So that's not aspiration. You can't get there, right? That's not every day. However, 1 out of 100, that's achievable. So think about it. There are 14 million salespeople in America, roughly. So if you're a 1%er, that means you're in a crowd of 140,000 people. That's one of 140,000. I could do that, right? And if you're one of the 140,000 people out of 14 million, you're pretty badass. And if you're that good at something, you will be successful. So my point in telling that story is this idea that you can get into a job and teach yourself to be passionate about it, teach yourself to excel. No, it doesn't work that way. You've got to want to be better than everybody else. You have got to want to be the best that you possibly can be. You got to get into that 1% category and want to. Like, the difference between what you're doing now and what you did when you were in medical sales is now, like you said it yourself, I want this podcast to be the best podcast. Well, is it going to be the best podcast? Who knows? But if you're one of the better than 99 out of every 100 podcasts, if you become a 1%er, this podcast is going to be successful. End of discussion. And that's what it's about, wanting to be that good.
So to get practical about this, and before we clicked record, we kind of went back and forth and, thought perhaps it's difficult to get practical about motivation because you screaming this at me is getting me excited, and that's probably reinforcing the intrinsic side of things with the podcast and all that. But to get practical, can we reverse engineer this and go from hundreds of thousands of people down to perhaps we need to, if in medical device sales, for me, on my patch, I only need to be the best there to win all the business.
No. Notice I said not the best medical device salesperson. No. That's like saying being the best on the Pop Warner football team. Okay? No. That's too small of a segment. You need to be the best at what you do. So if you're a medical salesperson, you need to be the best salesperson, a 1%er salesperson. That's cutting corners and cheating, saying, "Oh, I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the best SaaS salesperson in the South Side of Chicago selling, ABM SaaS software." Whatever. Cut the shit. Look, you're a salesperson. You want to be the best salesperson. If you're a doctor, I will say, okay, you want to be the best heart surgeon. I'm willing to go there, right?
The reason I ask you this, though, and the reason I drilled it down, rightly or wrongly, is that is more tangible, that's more applicable, and that might be your 12-month, 24-month goal, and perhaps you scale that up over time.
Oh.
What I'm saying is I want to put, if possible, a structure to it.
Okay. I don't think there is a structure. Like
or maybe, answer this, maybe my aspirations aren't big enough. Maybe I'm not playing a big enough game. Maybe, and let me picture this, maybe I shouldn't be after the biggest sales podcast, which we're pretty much there, like nearly 600,000 downloads last month. Obviously doing all these events, going for HubSpot, doing all this good stuff. There's no one really doing anything, especially on the video side of things, that can touch me. So, and tell me this, perhaps my aspirations for all this are too small, and this should be the biggest business show, or something along those lines.
Okay, so I believe you're mixing two things up. One, because we're talking about motivation, right?
Yep.
The motivation is intrinsic. So that's about you. What you described is, should this be the biggest show for sales podcast, should be the biggest show for business. Those are goals. Absolutely. As you get bigger, you got to move them. Look, I got into college on a scholarship to play for the top 10 football team, and now I want to get into the NFL. Then I want to sign a team. Then I want to start. Then I want to make the All-Star team, right? That's all good, right? But what's behind that is a commitment to be the best. There's a difference, right? Being the best is the outcome, the output of being the best is the growth of your show. But the idea that says, I'm willing to put in the work, I'm so motivated that I'm willing to put in the work to do this. I'm going to make this up because I don't do what you do every day, but I'm going to learn better interviewing skills. I'm going to learn how the equipment works so I get better cameras. I'm going to get better at understanding how to get something special out of guests. I'm going to create processes that allow me to create more of these in less time. Like, that's all part of getting better. That takes work. That's where the hustle and grind comes in. But the motivation to do that boring stuff, the motivation to keep doing it, that's intrinsic. So when you asked about steps, what if I do this and I do that? You could pick whatever steps work for you. What I want to get people to understand is this idea of passion and motivation. It's infinite. I feel it, and I'll do whatever it takes. That never ebbs and flows. Like, yeah, okay, there are days I may not want to do something, but collectively, I am always motivated, and there is no barrier to what the next step is, like you felt when you sold medical sales.
So let's forget sales. Let's forget even business, because this transgresses all that, because it might be that you want to be a missionary. I don't know, and that's what gets you, like, this passion that I'm feeling from you now. If the very first step of this is, if you've got to have that intrinsic passion there and motivation to become that 1%, that's the end result of that passion. How do we uncover what we're actually passionate about? Because that is something that, we do a degree. I'm talking about UK specifically. Degrees are totally oversaturated. Everyone's got a degree because all our parents wanted us to go to university, because their generation, it actually had a purpose, and it was a differentiator. Now everyone has one. So you go to university because your parents want you to go there. Then a lot of people fall into sales, and then they're in sales. They can't really leave because they're making good money, even though they don't particularly like it, and it's not really fulfilling them. And then they get to 45, 50, whatever it is, and go, shit, I'm stuck now. One, I've got a mortgage. I'm painting a stereotype here, but I've got a mortgage. I've got 2.5 kids. I've got this
I call it the brick wall.
Yeah. How for our audience, kind of like 25 to 35, this millennial group, means myself included. How do we uncover what the passion is before we get wrapped into this hamster wheel of just going on and on and on?
So what you described is what I call the brick wall. And it's not just salespeople. Almost everybody does this, right? They go to college, and they come out of college, and inevitably, in most cases, and there are some people who know from day one they want to be a lawyer. Like, my 10-year-old wants to be a lawyer, and she's reading the Constitution and taking notes. Does it stick? I don't know.
Yeah.
But right now she's passionate. If she gets there and that's what she did, she found it early, right? Tiger Woods found it early. Like, Tiger Woods could have been a skier, and his dad was teaching him how to putt. He hated it, but if whatever reason it clicked for Tiger, and he knew that's what he wanted to do, right? So I think with the lessons in those are this is, what it is. And the way is that it doesn't feel like there's something pushing back. When we're passionate about something, that we never feel that when we're doing it, something's pushing back at us. When we're doing something we're not passionate about, there gets to be a point where we feel like we're pushing against something. I don't want to go to the driving range. I don't like it. I don't want to do this. This is too hard. And again, don't confuse the micro, like I don't want to go to the driving range today, with I don't want to go to the driving range, right? So what we need to do is we need to understand, where do we not feel the pushback? What do we get excited to go do, whether someone asked us to do it or not? If we had free time, what would we go do? Pay attention to that. And the other thing I say is, if you don't know what that is, you're not feeling it, and you're not self-aware, because you've got to really be self-aware to understand this, then you may not have stumbled across it. So explore shit. Like, get out of your stupid hometown, right? Travel, read, meet people, go do stuff. I mean, here's the thing. I can't speak to England, but Americans blow my mind. The average American has gone to like 1 or 2 extra states. Less than 50% of 40, some dumb number, has ever even left the United States. Here's what'll blow your mind. The average American reads less than 1 book a year. So you're not going to find your passion if you just sit there on that stupid same stump and that same stupid town with the same stupid friends doing the same stupid stuff every day. You got to get your ass out and explore. And the minute you try more stuff, you're like, hey, I like that. That felt good. And that's the key. When it feels good, run with it. And as you're running, if you don't feel headwind, that's a good sign. If you start feeling headwind and you're like, I don't think I like this, then okay, find something else.
And I'm going to ask you for context from your personally from you in a second, but for me, that is, you're describing the podcast. I love having these conversations. It flows effortlessly. There's no time when I've just done 6 recordings today. I could do another 4 or 5, and I just enjoy talking about sales.
Yes.
So whether I was less motivated in the actual sales role I was in because I wasn't bought into the company or whatever is almost redundant of I enjoy talking about sales, and that's what I built a business around. But for yourself, clearly there's the sales training, there's content and everything else that comes along with that. What is your underlying motivator? What's your intrinsic motivation, and how does that tie in with the sales side of things? Because clearly we're both in the world of sales, but we've probably got different underlying kind of intrinsic motivations pushing both of us, a similar path, but from different directions perhaps.
So it's interesting for me, like what brought me to sales, and it almost brought me into politics. I absolutely, positively love discussion, debate. Like I should have been on the debate team, right? I absolutely love debate and discussion. Well, debate, if you really do it correctly, is influence. Here are the facts. Let me help shape how you think about something. Well, that's what sales is in a much tempered, less structured way, right? You believe something, and I want you to see another point of view to help influence you in trying to get something done. The other part is I'm a huge problem solver. I love strategy games. I love my old manager used to say, I know how to motivate you, Keenan. Simply tell you can't do something, and you're jumping all over it, right? He's like, oh, Keenan, I don't think you could do this. And what? I'll prove you wrong, right? So I love that idea of solving problems. So when you start thinking about, and then another piece of myself that I didn't realize was with me my whole life but didn't click, was I also love teaching and coaching. Now, I don't know that I want to be a teacher with such a structure, but I love helping people get better. So when you put those 3 things together, there wasn't much headwind for me, right? So running my own business is solving problems 24/7, working with companies and helping them fix their businesses when revenue's down, they're trying to scale and they can't figure out, or they don't understand why they're not closing the deals, whatever that is, that's all problem solving. So I get to do that, solve the problems, and then I get to teach them how to solve the problems. So the 3 things that I love, influencing people, solving problems, and teaching and coaching, all come together in this concept. And so
when did you know this? Because the reason I asked that is I love solving problems. I love debating people, and especially when it's something to do with technology or predicting the future, when it's not so tangible as black or white. I love these conversations, and you're only giving me this enlightenment now as we're going through this. So perhaps we're more similar than what I our intrinsic motivations are more similar than what I would have thought they were 5 minutes ago, which is awesome. But when did you start to uncover all of this?
So it's a great question. I think, how do I describe this? I think I always knew it was there, right? So there was never a point in there's a conscious and subconscious. I wanted to go to law school. The main reason I wanted to go to law school was because, one, I love politics. I love discussion and debate and all that. So I was like, I want to be a lawyer. Well, I had a friend who was 2 years ahead of me, and he was in law school, and I saw what he was doing, and I started to realize like 85% of law has nothing to do with the things that I love.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's all about writing, and it's briefs, and it's just bullshit that I wanted nothing to do with. So subconscious is like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't like this piece, and the piece I love is too small. So it was always there, but I don't think I was overtly conscious about it. I think I was subliminally conscious, aware enough not to do it. And then as far as getting into sales, look, I sold since I was a little kid. I was always having the lemonade stands. I would go door to door with the raffle tickets and knock on someone, buy a raffle ticket for my school. If my school said to sell raffle tickets, my kids won't do this. It drives me insane. Go sell to the neighbors. You beat everybody. Other kids would sell their uncles, their aunts, and whatever. And they come in with 10, 12, 15 sold. I went door to door in every single freaking neighborhood, and I'd sold 100, right? And come in and be like, yeah, I mean, I got all, So it was always like that. When it became conscious, look, I think that comes with age in many cases. That's why you have to be self-aware. You don't always have to give it a label, and you don't have to be able to sit down and write it down, but you'll know. I think the best example is the headwind. When I started leaning into law, I felt the headwind. That doesn't feel good. I don't want to be doing that. That doesn't appeal to me, so I pulled back, right? So just lean into the things that feel good, and if there's no headwind, start running faster. And if there's no headwind, run. If there's a headwind, evaluate it. Is it a daily headwind, right, versus a holistic headwind? Holistic headwind is, I don't really want to do this, right? I don't want to do this. Okay, that's holistic headwind. I don't want to do this today. Everybody has those. I'm sure there's days Tigers didn't want to go to the driving range that day, right? But collectively, it's keep going. I love it. Let's just keep going. So you got to be that in tune with yourself.
I'm glad you said that. This is a trend that is coming up more and more on the show because of people like Guy Vaynerchuk talking about the grind and all these cliche terms that I don't know if they were cliche 10 years ago, but in my kind of consuming of content of this nature, they're now becoming cliche. And this idea that there's not really a silver bullet. It takes time. You've got to experiment. You've got to do different things. If you're, intrigued about sales, perhaps you've got to go in different industries. But this concept of the headwind, I really enjoy. With that, Keenan.
Oh, there is something I will say. You re-triggered something, and I don't know how to define this, but you've got to be aware of it. And it's interesting. I wrote about this in my book, Not Top, but Angela Duckworth also talks about it in her book, Grit. And Angela doesn't use grit, just really work really hard. She also talks about this thing of deliberate practice. I call it deliberate learning. And we talk about this idea that when you try to get good at something, it gets to be a point where the amount of work you put in is then minimized or overshadowed by the return, right? So at first when you start something, a little bit of work, tons of return, but you get to a point where you got to work your butt off to get a little bit better. And a lot of people start freaking out there. I call it the point of positive return, right? If I practice skiing for a day, I get this much better. You get to a point where I have to practice skiing for months to get this much better. People don't like that. If you really, really know you're good at something, or you're passionate about it, you will keep pushing past that. You will get to where the extra work doesn't bother you, even though you don't see a return right away. And I think that's something people don't address enough. It takes practice. No matter how much you love it, no matter how much you want to do it, it takes practice. And you have to be willing to practice, to deliberately learn to get better.
So I've interviewed Angela on this topic. I'll link to that in show notes to this episode. And have you read Seth Godin's The Dip?
I have not.
So similar kind of process of you don't know how much you don't know until you get to a certain point. And I don't know the figures. I'm going to butcher them here, but I'll link to these in show notes as well, of the amount of money that goes through the golf industry, billions and billions and billions. A huge majority of that is that first kind of like 2-3 weeks, months learning.
Yes.
You buy your first set of golf clubs, and you never play again.
Yes.
And they're making a killing from that. So clearly it's across all the industries, whether you're working in sales or not. So I appreciate that.
Yes.
And I've got one final question. You've answered it a bunch of times before, but I'm going to ask you it again. And that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
It's almost always saying, I don't know there is anything I would tell myself. I mean, if I really, really was pushed, I think I would tell myself to have more confidence. But I don't know how you can tell someone to have more confidence, right? But if I look back, I think my lack of confidence and insecurity, which,
Could that be a self-awareness thing that you could go back and self-awareness would help bring that up and you'd see that it's a limiting factor? Or is it, again, there's just no magic bullets?
So what I think for me, that one, like the reason I don't go back and tell myself it is almost everything that I've experienced was a massive learning experience. I wouldn't want to trade that away, right? So I was really, really, really good at minimizing my mistakes. I did stupid stuff, don't get me wrong. I mean, I did more stupid stuff than most people. But my stupid stuff was like if this is really bad and this is not making stupid stuff, I did like a million of these little stupid things that, for most part, could never create any permanent damage, right? So I was really good at just doing stupid stuff that couldn't permanently hurt me. And I wouldn't trade any of that. I learned so much about it. Like my credit, for instance, I had like a 300 credit when I was 25. I couldn't buy a car, right? I remember the manager came on and said, Jim, what am I supposed to do with this? And I learned, okay, don't screw that up again. Like that's a learning experience, right? So I wouldn't change any of that. And what I was thinking about is insecurity. Look, those types of things are the results of our childhood, right? And so, I won't go too into my childhood, but I know where a lot of my insecurity came from. And I couldn't control that. I mean, that's my surroundings. It's just how I grew up and what happened and how I subconsciously or consciously chose to respond to it. And so it's something as I've got older to get more comfortable with who I am and be more okay with who I am. And I don't think you can change that. That's so. I guess I would tell myself that as for a confidence boost, but I don't think there's anything I could change it. It just was what it was.
Like for me, looking outside in, because you're processing this, I'm asking you the question. It almost seems like you could go back and just say it's going to be okay. It's going to work out.
Yes.
Not to psychotherapy
you
on the podcast.
Yes.
But if I was in that situation, that would be just that at the back of my mind of it's going to be all right.
Yes. Which I think I knew all along. Teachers hated me. Okay, so that's a strong word. Many teachers were frustrated with me. Some actually did hate me. There were always those that were like, Keenan's a smart guy. He's going to be good. But most couldn't get it, right? They were too short-sighted. I didn't fit the mold. But I always knew, and I think that's also why I didn't do anything stupid, like really, really dumb.
Yeah.
It's like I knew I'm going to get there. Maybe not in your time frame, maybe not how you want, but I'm going to be fine. I remember telling I got kicked out of my house, and so I lived with a friend. So I can't call them dad, but they helped me get through my final senior year of high school. I got kicked out. And I remember telling them I'm going to be a millionaire by 30. And I didn't quite make it, but at 35, right? And I was like, I did it, right? And so I knew back then. You know what I'm saying? I knew back then. I just didn't know how and couldn't script it out, but I had confidence.
Nice. Maybe that's the intrinsic thing that's running it on the programming it. Someone, when you're a kid, so whatever's gone on and someone said something, someone's spoken, you've watched something on TV, you've seen someone else break through, and that little voice, because I have the same thing of just keep plodding along, it's going to be okay, it's going to sort itself out, and that's what helps me take risks. All the risks I take are, can I recover from this in 12 months time? If I can, straight in. So I kind of burnt the bridges with my last job because I knew that the podcast, or at that time there was a whole bunch of stuff we were doing with the Salesman.red brand, and the podcast is the thing that took off. I knew it'd be okay, and it's for me it's as simple as that. And you've kind of touched on it, and I want you to give it a plug now. Tell us a little bit about Not Taught and where we can find out more about yourself, Keenan.
Yeah, so Not Taught, what it takes to be successful in the 21st century. It's been out for a year, but the more I reread it and people come and talk to me, I think I'm going to relaunch it. It is so pertinent to what people need to get done today. People are completely missing the ball in their own career development because they're still practicing 20th century, tools for career development. So nottaught.com. You can find me at salesguy.com, and you can put in Jim Keenan in Google and I'll be the whole front page.
Amazing stuff. Well, I'll link to all that in the show notes as well over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with that, Keenan, thank you, mate, for bringing the energy, the conversation as always. Go for that layer deeper than what a lot of guests do. I appreciate the candidness of it and for joining us on the show.
You got it. If you're going to be in, you got to go all in, right? Don't play on the surface. Don't play on the surface. Everybody plays on the surface. Go deep or don't play.